last one thing before I have to disappear. I think what we really need right now after this revolution, we need to have a stand, we need to re-evaluate our situation, we need to define what our aims for these new cities and satellite cities. What are we wanting out of these? Are they supposed to be standalone cities, or are they supposed to be linked with Cairo? If that's the case, that we're not solving the current issue we're facing with the implosion of Cairo. So we need to redefine these. We need to define a strategy, how we're going to act upon these new issues. And most importantly, we need to coordinate, because otherwise everything will be scattered everywhere and we will not solve a single issue. That's all I wanted to do. Thank you very much.
Thanks a lot. Cheers. Thank you. Are there any more thoughts from the audience? Sarah? Yeah.
If I may? Okay. Thank you for the platform, and thank you for providing the space to think critically about these things. I mean, well, I certainly agree that these sort of satellite cities are significant in their own right. I'd just like to go on something that you said earlier about the general regime that basically governed this, and that was basically privatizing different parts of the city in different ways, and the way in which international capital was flowing either formally, through formal channels, or informally, and transforming the city rapidly. And building on that, I'd like to go back to something that you had raised and which was echoed several times about sort of class consciousness, or perhaps, I believe I heard the word sympathy or empathy at some point. And while I think that that kind of transparency is really important, at the same time, I think that, particularly during what someone was mentioning earlier about violence taking place near these areas, or what have you, I think that once you enter into a property relation, this question of sympathy, or this question of unity, is already sort of a priori answer. It's answered just by virtue of the way in which property is securitized. And this, I think, I would really like to put this on the table as something that everyone sort of goes away thinking about, which is that over the next few years, I mean, regime or no regime, I think at this point we're already part of a revolutionary process. And I think that this, state sovereignty has clearly sort of been exhibited as bankrupt. These projects have been continuing, they are going to continue. Capital is not really awaiting this sort of policy-based regulation that everyone is sort of alluding to. So the question becomes, what then? And then I think that you have to look at this very economically, and you have to look at who's securing these properties and in whose interests they exist. Because in a few years' time, the accumulation process is going to come to an even more severe halt. I mean, the crisis is deepening day after day. And we're still living under a military regime, and it is still very much the military that is maintaining this sort of security complex, and it's only going to get worse in a few years' time. So I guess my question to you and to anyone else who's sort of grappling with this, this class anxiety is, what happens then when the accumulation comes to a halt, but there is all of this space, all of these resources that are evidently, at least partially, inhabited? I mean, what becomes of the property relation then? And what becomes of the sympathy then? When we're living under martial law, we technically are, but it's only going to get worse in a few years' time. What becomes of the property relation then? And what are you going to say to the masses and masses and masses of people who are, I mean, I think a little more than just disenfranchised, when you do have swaths of space and land and water occupied and heavily militarized, and no one can access them? I guess I'd just like to leave that for everyone.
Sure. Does anybody want to jump in on that point?
I was thinking, now we're putting this whole thing on the table. What are the solutions? So we need to look back on the reasons why the problem started in the first place. Somebody was wondering, these compounds, who's going to buy this land and everything. So let's see, where do people who have some money can invest it? The previous governments killed any source of investment. You cannot go and make a factory to build something like plastic plates or something, because it's cheaper to get it from abroad. So people went and, okay, real estate is the way to go, and we can buy land for like 10 years or something, and then sell it for a higher price. So those people are targeting people who have some lump sums of money and can invest in the real estate business. Another thing, talking about the parliament and everything and the decisions we have to make, let's look back on when and why this whole thing started. It started with selling the public sector stupidly, like the cement factories, and then came companies like Cemex and Lafarge. They are the mass or the biggest cement producer in the world. Okay, where will they sell? So all the investment was like polarized in this sector, the real estate, to serve these guys, and of course the people who were ruling at the time, they were getting some cash. So we need to look in these problems or the reasons for the problems and push the parliament people to find solutions for these things, because it's influential.
Do you just have interest? Do you think those solutions can come from Parliament as it's currently?
Of course, it's not the only thing, but if we can push for some legalization, if we can push for some vision, not to only work on the problems we have now. We have to look forward, 50 years forward. So I think we can come up with something.
Let's get that, and then
question.
Yeah.
Question about governance, because we were talking a lot about the government and policy and governance. To which extent did the emergence of these cities affect the redistribution of vote and the borders of voting this year, and 2 years ago the new governments and how they were like divided? To what extension, especially that many, including myself, would like to see more localized power, being like more local power in every neighborhood and every like city. But with the presence of such cities, it's very, very dangerous. So, I mean, I see it as dangerous. So, to what extent will this affect the distribution? I don't know if anybody
That's a really interesting question. Unfortunately, I don't know about the electoral boundaries between new cities. I don't know, Mohamed, do you?
I don't know too much, but I remember when they advertised about the website where you can look on your district and whatever, and I was curious. Something seemed a bit off. Also, if you follow the numbers, if we take the relatively conservative but also realistic guess that the population is, let's say, about 22 million, we're talking about also assuming, we don't have specific numbers, right? So assuming that this is roughly about 20, maybe more % of the population of Egypt living in Cairo, the representation in parliament is only about 10% in numbers. Like, this is off, something is wrong. And also, I mean, basically, this is why statistics are national security for the regime, for a regime that was working for the benefits of a very particular segment of population. Because if you go and actually get real statistics about how many people live in Boulat, the people of Boulat better have a lot of voice, because there's a lot of people in Boulat. Or if you go and see how many people live in Sheikh Nasser and find out that that tiny piece of land has something like 600,000 people, they better have a lot of voice about uptown Cairo, which is 5 times the size, but is only meant for 4,000 homes. You know, this is all based on statistics and governance. So this is why you wouldn't want these numbers to take place.
But in fact, the statistics are available. I mean, if you go and get the 2006 census, you'll get it by Shiecha and village. You see exactly what Greater Cairo is made up of. The problem is that they're not accessible easily, and people don't know them. But they're there. If you go and buy the books, they're not on the web. Unfortunately, you can get all the statistics you need, okay, with their faults.
Yes.
No statistics are perfect. But they're not systematically trying to mislead. They're essentially, as everything else in Egyptian government, doesn't work too well. And so the statistics are, people don't report, they don't trust government, you go and ask them how many people live in your house, they will tell you half the number, etc. But it's not because there is a plot out there not to inform us.
Right, but there isn't a serious effort to really get correct information either. I mean, for example, if we take a really simple, I mean, the guy that I know, like 3 of the guys that I have to deal with on a daily basis, you know, my web, the trash guy, they don't have national ID numbers. I mean, I know, for example, that the guy that takes my trash was a very important person in my life. Because somebody has to do it. He doesn't count. He doesn't exist as far as the government is concerned. And who knows about the rest of his family? So these are real people that are not really represented in numbers.
The worst sector to get statistics from, I'm in the business of collecting statistics, is the rich. It's impossible to actually get statistics from the top 10%, or very difficult, especially if you're talking to them about consumption, about employment, about a variety. They kick the enumerators out, they don't want to talk to them. But the bottom 90%, especially the bottom 50%, are quite cooperative. They may not tell you what is true, they may tell you what they think you want to hear, but they're quite cooperative.
Anybody got any more points from the audience? Yeah?
Just want to highlight, my name is Ahmed, just want to highlight two issues. The issue about that if the regime, the political regime, the country is better, so this will get better. I don't think so. This is an issue of global regime. So you can draw parallels on social segregation, physical segregation like this in Sao Paulo, in Istanbul, in many different countries. So it's an issue of. So the key issues to solve this have been mentioned separately, like the economic independence and actually making the local governments alive again. Because actually we have solid local governments laws and in the protected by also laws in the all the constitution, but they're corrupted. So if the local governments, this will help a lot. This and other places.